let's dive in here today. So I'm Aaron Brickman with RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute. I lead our economic development team, and we help places identify and capture economic opportunity from clean energy deployment and the clean tech manufacturing supply chain. And over the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of being involved in several, I think, catalytic conversations where ReImagine Appalachia has been driving towards developing a vision and this draft action plan we're going to hear about for transforming the Ohio River Valley of Appalachia into a sustainable hub for manufacturing. In this session, in a moment, we'll hear an overview of the updated draft plan and begin discussion of how we and reimagine, finalize the plan, and move from planning to action. So a little context setting for why this is important, at least from my perspective. I think Amanda said it really well yesterday in terms of this session, in terms of the plan, in terms of the process. The more input, the better the plan. And I also heard Ryan Eller of Appalachia Funders Network yesterday say, as we're drilling down in for the micro, he said, you know, data center development risks becoming the next extractive economy for the region unless time and attention is taken to ensure community benefits. And I'd say, or other ancillary benefits. So the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan has taken lots of work, direct by Amanda and the ReImagine team, but also with loads of input. So it's important, and the process has been important to ensuring voices of the region are driving change and progress. As you'll hear, the plan puts forth a vision that addresses challenges, the changing national context, as well as the opportunities. There are opportunities for homegrown regional leadership and, importantly, economic activity and expansion. So that's the background. Let's begin. I hope you all are doing what I asked on Mentimeter. It's sort of like fun and engaging, but also important. So in terms of who you're about to hear from, I think Amanda Woodrum needs no introduction, but you'll first be hearing from Amanda. So buckle up. Then we have Nikhil Kalathil, the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives and a research scientist at Carnegie Mellon University's Critical Technology Initiative. We have Carlos Clausel, Manager, Climate, Community Benefits, and Social Impact with the World Wildlife Fund, and Deborah Stein, Founder, Science and Technology Policy Academy. Very excited for this. Without further ado, let me hand it over to you, Amanda.
Let me get myself off mute. Thank you for the introduction. Let me find there you are. Slideshow. And get started. All right. Oops, that didn't work. Let's try it again. There you are. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So we wanted to start by sharing an outline of and a high-level overview of the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan in order to help inform today's discussion. We'll talk about how we got to where we are, what a high-level overview of what's in it, at least at this point, and what we're thinking for the work to do in 2016 to move it forward. So let's start with the national landscape and where we're at. The U.S. is actually in a manufacturing moment. After many years of global outsourcing and a lack of industrial policy that particularly devastated our region, There is now, for the first time, a bipartisan agreement on growing domestic manufacturing. I think there may be different views on how to go about that, but the common ground is that, in fact, there is a recognition after a long period of time that we do need to grow domestic manufacturing. We're starting to see reshoring of formerly outsourced production lines and a focus on expanding existing companies into new and growing markets. And another big thing is that the markets now are rapidly changing for a whole host of factors, including AI data centers, 3D printing, the increased demand for more sustainable products. Large companies demanding carbon footprinting. The biggest growing market in building is green building. And we're also seeing an elevated demand and growing demand for alternatives to single-use plastic. And all these things are also massively changing energy markets. And for the first time, possibly ever, we're seeing competition in what was formerly energy only dominated by energy monopolies. And to accomplish that, the energy is changing from centralized to more distributed energy sources. And that creates a whole host of opportunities. Okay, oops, I don't know why it's not moving forward. There we go. All right. And that means that opportunity means with the right resources and attention and focus, we can actually transform the Ohio River Valley of Appalachia, better known as coal country, to become a hub for modern manufacturing. How do we get from here to there? We need a roadmap. That's what's going to help us get from where we are to where we want to go. Uh, in other words, a comprehensive plan for building an Appalachian manufacturing ecosystem built for the 21st century. That means building on our existing strengths, our companies, our assets. It also means recognizing where the markets are headed, whether we like it or not, and identifying solutions to overcoming investment barriers, much of what we heard during yesterday's panels and discussions. But as we grow manufacturing, let's make sure to do it responsibly, in a way that centers workers, builds local wealth, works to achieve carbon neutrality and global competitiveness, and reduces waste by employing reuse and circular manufacturing principles. Now, let's talk about how we got to where we are. We have, in fact, developed a draft of a manufacturing action plan, and I underline draft here because it is nowhere near finished. There is still lots of room for improvement and input. That draft plan was done through a series of manufacturing team and monthly meetings that drove listening sessions and roundtable discussions, all of which were used to inform what we refer to as participatory action research. In the fall, a few months ago, we held an Appalachian Manufacturing Strategy Summit to get reactions to that draft manufacturing action plan through multi-stakeholder engagement and input, and shared the document widely for review. So let's get into what we found through all those research, listening sessions, what you told us really, is that we have a number of existing assets, starting with this unique regional identity in Appalachia that really is nothing like it anywhere else in the country. And with the proper collaboration across state lines as well as stakeholder groups, that is really the key to scaling up and turning the region into a hub for the next generation of manufacturing. And we've had a long history and strength in key industrial product markets. despite global outsourcing and the decimation, in particular, of our steel industry, we still have, more strength in manufacturing than anywhere else in the country. We're also at a central proximity to large consumer markets, ranging from Chicago to New York. We heard a lot yesterday about the incredibly skilled manufacturing and trades workers that we have in the region and the incredible training centers, particularly union apprenticeship centers and other career tech centers in and around the region. What's also unique about Appalachia is our historic waterways and railways that represent a low carbon way of shipping. So the past is now becoming the future. And as companies reduce their carbon footprints, they will be looking to ways to reduce that in transportation. And we have some of those answers right here in the region. We also have coal waste streams that hold critical minerals and rare earth elements. Of course, really, really important to the manufacturing moment we're having and changing markets. And we have shuttered coal and former steel plants that can be transformed into manufacturing hubs with co-located industries. Those are great assets that make Appalachia ripe for investment. So let's dig into a little of our particular manufacturing strengths. We are 3 times stronger than anywhere else in the country when it comes to primary metals. We're also strong in fabricated metals, machinery. We have the strongest wood product industry, and also going with that comes furniture industry. We also are strong in non-metallic minerals like concrete and cement. And all of these represent connections to growing industries. As many of you probably already know, where I'm headed with the critical minerals, the battery tech and other clean tech. Wood leads us to a strong position for mass timber or engineered wood. Our strength in plastics, the biggest growing markets in plastics is, of course, bioplastics. And we also have a long history with industrial hemp, which is a form of alternative to single-use plastic, as well as an important component of building out the green building supply chain. Our coal, rather than burn it, can be turned into carbon fiber for all kinds of great things. As we grow out data centers, we can also become the hub for the data center supply chain. Of course, bringing back steel and growing steel domestically. We should be doing that here. Let's do it in a green fashion. And of course, we're digging into, as well as other groups like Catalyst Connection, into what role we can play in energy tech manufacturing, like wind turbines and geothermal. So, a background as far as not only can we make it in Appalachia, but can also grow it in Appalachia. When we talk about bioplastics and alternatives to single-use plastics and green building, all of those things use bio feedstocks. So, a twofer here with both job opportunities in agriculture and manufacturing. Let's talk about one of the biggest barriers to that industry is the lack of processing facilities. But we also have a long history of co-ops, all kinds of co-ops, producer co-ops, purchasing co-ops, and we can do that to create processing centers for bio feedstocks. Let's talk about our shuttered coal plants in particular. These are huge swaths of industrial land, well situated for co-location of industry was an important piece of doing manufacturing more sustainably. These sites have heavily reinforced electrical grid infrastructure, good for industry, good for data centers, and access to carbon friendly modes of transportation already all built in there. Lots of benefits to co-location that helps lower cost for purposes of promoting industrial competitiveness in a way that doesn't lower wages. That on these co-located sites, we can support industries with like clean incentives or green incentives through shared waste stream management, shared energy service, shared access to multimodal transportation system, and reuse facilities. Of course, there's a number of barriers that can be overcome that have been identified, and some of them are, of course, capital access to upgrade the rail, electrify the ports, expand broadband to these sites, R&D, and of course, support for the energy and supply chain and waste management services. We can just building on that idea, the is that one company's waste is another company's raw material. We have an asset already working across multiple states in the reuse corridor and work to do in that space. Somebody put in the notes yesterday that Appalachia, one of its nicknames is Scrapalachia. We're good at reducing waste and reusing waste, and let's take it to scale and create commercial markets for opportunity purposes. All right, our background as far as decarbonizing industry, that we have a lot of industry with that is energy intensive and with high emissions. So let's subsidize those industry to not only lower energy costs, but reduce those emissions, which is good for everyone. That's a win-win-win for workers, for the environment, and of course, lowering costs for industry. In those ways we can go about that. Some of that is increasing industrial assessments and access to that. Totally worth subsidizing the adoptions of equipment recommended for those purposes. Many of you have worked with us to document and support the $400 million program in Pennsylvania to decarbonize industry called RISE PA. As we work to implement that, that can be a model for other states. It's a good area of focus for now. Work in Appalachia, we need to make sure as we build out manufacturing that we're doing it in a way that creates good union jobs. Also note that we have incredible assets in our union apprenticeships, and we can make sure that any new projects include apprenticeship requirements, as well as support for local hiring for the jobs created. And we'd like to see an expansion of the apprenticeship system, which is mostly now in the building trades, into manufacturing. So replication of that great system to manufacturing. And of course, we want to promote private investment. We dug into this yesterday, and we think it helps to have a to coordinate storytelling and talking points. That's part of the purpose of the manufacturing the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan, promoting multi-stakeholder alignment, working across states, creating a one-stop shop for investors. We need to, align workforce and training. So thank you to our labor partners that are here today to help us do that. And of course, address access to capital and infrastructure gaps, align across state lines, the regulatory and permitting, as well as federal policy. Lots of opportunities and good examples for joint procurement amongst anchor institutions and local governments for local products to de-risk investments, and really leading in that fashion with a Buy Appalachia campaign to promote that with model procurement policy. And we're getting towards the end. One other unique thing, which can be a barrier to development in Appalachia, is that crazy land policy and lots of absentee land ownership and a lack of transparency for who owns what. So there's some ways to overcome those barriers through increased local government capacity and pre-development support for those purposes from states and the federal government. And there's some good programs to balance that on. Okay, and this is the last of it. Let's talk about today what's next for the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan. This obviously isn't going to happen overnight, but here is the work we're thinking to do in 2016 for everyone's thoughts. Is the idea to form an Appalachian Manufacturing Advisory Board that's multi-stakeholder, multi-state, in order to help guide the path forward for the manufacturing action plan. And with that information, work to finalize that draft, make a plan for how to finalize that draft so that everybody who wants to gets a chance to get their 2 cents into the document. We will then seek organizational endorsements and publicize it. We're thinking about doing a multi-state roadshow. And last but not least, I would like to have a goal of creating a federal policy platform, at least close to finish before the end of the year. And that's what I've got. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it back over to Aaron.
That was an actual deep dive. So you did a lot in 15 minutes. Kudos. A couple things that I heard loud and clear, centering this plan around existing assets that can be scaled up, turn the region into a hub for the next generation of manufacturing. Those strengths in primary metals, wood products, machinery, furniture, non-metallic materials, these have genuine connections to fast-growing global industries that can lead to, among other things, mass timber, engineered wood, industrialized construction, and so on. That there are many assets. I really like the slide on assets, not just physical or extractive, but centered around the people, places, and power or energy of the region. So 2026 is important for finalizing the plan. You made that point loud and clear. So let's watch out for more from ReImagine. Nikhil Kalathil, let's go. Over to you.
Hello, thanks everyone, and it's great to be here. Always a pleasure to talk with the ReImagine Appalachia folks and to be able to present and talk about learnings to improve manufacturing ecosystems. As Amanda mentioned, manufacturing had been in decline in the States for many years until rather recently. And I think one of the really exciting things about manufacturing and one of the more difficult things about manufacturing is that it really requires a whole of supply chain approach and a whole of supply chain investment to make work. The rapid decline that we saw over the last 20 to 30 years was precipitated by some of those linkages, where as you see certain pillars start to fall out of the manufacturing ecosystem, it perpetuates the fallout of more pillars on that ecosystem. And now I think we have an opportunity to change some of those trends, to make use of both private and policy headwinds that we're benefiting from to start reinvigorating some of these Appalachian communities and some of the manufacturing potential that lies in this region. What's really nice about the manufacturing strategy that I think is far more complete than Amanda and folks would give themselves credit for, I think it's a really impressive piece of work that they've pulled together, is that it helps drive coordination across the many different players and the many different industries that are already active and operating in this region that have the real opportunity and the potential to work together to complement one another and to start really seeing wins that benefit the whole system and make sure that the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. Again, that's one of the really exciting parts of the plan that Amanda has put forward. And all of those individual sectors that Amanda highlighted are not sectors that are individually strong, but are sectors that are strong, especially when they are linked and connected together with one another, where the inputs from one sector can easily feed into the outputs of the other sectors, and so on and so forth, especially when incorporated with the reuse redevelop, and recycle plans that the ReImagine Appalachia folks have pulled together quickly. I'll share a few slides to think about ecosystem coordination and ecosystem approaches, because what this really requires is getting a lot of the community members who have different incentives, who have different interests and different expertise and skills to start rowing in the same direction and to start aligning incentives with one another to realize these outcomes that are really transformative and that are really powerful. However, doing that ecosystem coordination is not an easy thing to do. And so we've been building out some tools and some approaches to try and help make that a little bit smoother and a little bit easier. Let me just turn this into slideshow mode. Hopefully you guys can still see my screen. In general, ecosystem assessment is a emerging science. It's been around for many years at this point, but it's really, I think, coming into its head recently with programs like the Chips and Science Act, with the NSF regional engines, EDA tech hubs, and just more approaches that start to really think about how do we elevate and level up the potential of an entire ecosystem together. What's important and what's needed about ecosystem assessment is the role of coordinating action, monitoring programs, and accelerating and adapting interventions. And to this end, there's a basic kind of framework that we can think about in terms of how we should do ecosystem assessment. At the baseline, we want to identify what the conditions on the ground are. We want to identify where we have strengths and where we have weaknesses to effectively create a common language so that individual stakeholders and community members can all be talking about the same things and can be aligned and coordinated about what specific goals they want to solve, problems they want to tackle, et cetera, et cetera. From identifying those baseline conditions and building on this common language, we can start identifying strategic interventions and specifically highlighting individual actors and institutions that are either already operating in these specific areas or are well positioned to do so. And then finally, we want to be able to connect interventions to individual and ecosystem outcomes. Here, we want to basically be able to see how an individual program or opportunity is going to push the needle forward in a specific direction, but then also contribute to the whole ecosystem as a whole and really feedback those learnings and returns into the system. The pillars that we use at the moment are workforce and training, research and innovation, infrastructure and site development, supply chain support, trade and international investment, and operational improvement and capital access. These are just 6 example buckets of ways that you might organize how you think about your ecosystem. And the point is that each of these individual pillars have a variety of indicators that we can use to get a sense of where are we strong or where are we weak and where do we have specific strengths and programs. But then what I'd really want you to do is go beyond that and start thinking about who are the institutions and the actors that are already operating in your communities, doing work on these in each of these pillars, and how can we start operationalizing individuals and getting them to work together. We did some work here in Utah doing exactly this, where we went and we started helping them map out their workforce ecosystem. And one of the cool things that we learned is that this is a hugely networked ecosystem where a lot of the individual actors that were working on similar projects that were very complementary were actually not aware of the other actors that were operating in this ecosystem. And so once we started doing this ecosystem assessment exercise and this mapping exercise, we were able to get these individual actors to start working together and start really working on programs that are going to be much greater than the individual programs could have been without these additional connections. I'll stop there just because I'm running out of time, but I'd like to, just close with a re-emphasis on the fact that these ecosystem plans and these manufacturing agendas really require buy-in from the community and requires each individual community member to kind of do their part in improving the specific pillars, the specific industries, the specific supply chains that they're invested in and that they're working on.
Thank you, Nikhil. Really, really great contributions from your presentation. This ecosystem assessment, and I think we do need to find some time to talk about this on the side. I think this is a really excellent model in terms of, ensuring that a place is in control, all right, of its future. How best to organize the ecosystem becomes how best to organize our ecosystem. And so, with the touching with circularity, and how sectors can be strongest for impact that is lasting, and not simply extractive. Thank you very much. Let's move to Carlos. Over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. I want to thank Carlos Clausel with the World Wildlife Fund. I want to thank the invitation. I want to thank ReImagine Appalachia for inviting me and the great panelists that we have here sharing really, really important insight. So I'm gonna share a little bit of a perspective around industrial decarbonization because I think like Amanda mentioned in the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan clearly states industrial decarbonization is not only about reducing emissions, which is really important in energy intensive industries. It's more importantly a core economic strategy that can really provide multiple essential benefits to the region. And to quote Nikhil, what Nikhil shared just now is that these sectors individually have really important challenges, but if these sectors come together and they're really strong and they can really significantly advance that economic vision and turn it into tangible benefits for all. As the Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan states, industrial decarbonization or reducing emissions in energy intensive industries can mean different set of actions and approaches about it can be in industrial electrification, emissions reductions within industrial heat, industrial thermal energy, installing on-site renewable energy, etc. And when we look at the different suite of sectors, whether it's metals, wood products, furniture, plastics and rubbers, etc., electrical equipment, we have that whole suite of sectors that can really transform a place. When we think about industrial decarbonization, we often forget about industrial thermal decarbonization, which represents a critical and overlooked not only climate mitigation opportunity, but also a really driving approach to really advance that economic strategy forward. Industrial thermal decarbonization is often seen as a hard to abate sector, so it's often overlooked. But about 25% of the total energy used in the US comes from thermal energy. And some of these subsectors within the industrial thermal space that receive more attention, like cement and steel, that do have higher heat needs. Therefore, it's a bit more challenging to really find pathways to really advance that decarbonization path. But then also we must not forget about the low and medium temperature heat space that continues to receive little attention. Although low and medium heat processes dominate industrial thermal emissions and account for 78% of total emissions. And what do we mean when we talk about low or medium heat? It's food and beverage, it's pharmaceutical, it's consumer goods. Those sort of sectors are also really important, are part of the Appalachian region, and it's a really an important subset of the entire set of sectors that we need to look for a way of integrating that economic strategy vision as part of industrial decarbonization or leverage industrial decarbonization for that end. Really important barriers to advance industrial decarbonization and industrial thermal decarbonization. We're talking about lack of suitable policy at the national and national level. So we need to really think about ways in which we can take that vision from the region and really translate it into actual policies that can really help us move this work forward. WEF co-founded the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, which is the only global and buyer-led coalition comprised of about 130 organizations focusing on decarbonizing thermal energy with the deployment of renewable solutions. We work in the not only the technology space, but also the market development and policy space. And we're working with those companies, mostly private sector, but also representing institutions and public sector as well, looking to really help advance that industrial decarbonization vision from an economic stance. And when we think about the opportunity, if we begin to link where are these industries located in, well, we did an initial assessment of our members, RTC members, and we identified that about 73% of our members' industrial facilities are located within low-income and disadvantaged communities, the whole suite of communities that we really want to foster and support and really connect industrial decarbonization to delivering benefits for those communities. We're talking about environmental justice, energy communities, rural communities, and so forth. So beginning to see how we can move a vision of economic development forward and leverage industrial decarbonization is also a way of securing that we are beginning to connect those dots. Just to give an example, in Pennsylvania, RTC members have about 175 manufacturing facilities, and overall, across all of their operations, employ about 90,000 people. So beginning to make those links is something that is really, really essential. I bring Pennsylvania because one example that we want to highlight, as Amanda mentioned, is the RICE-PA grant. RICE-PA, Reducing Industrial Sector Emissions in Pennsylvania, is a really, really interesting model that we need to learn more about it. We're on the early stages. It's a grant that was funded by the EPA, Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, but it is a really, really interesting approach for leveraging state policy, in this case, a grant program, to really, really not only move industrial decarbonization forward, but do so in a way that also produces co-benefits. And the reason this grant co-benefits and benefits for people. The way this grant tries to achieve this is by linking public funds with connecting those recipients of these funds with commitments to delivering benefits through fair labor bonuses, through community benefits bonuses, community benefits planning and agreements. So it's a way of making sure that public resources that are used to advance industrial decarbonization are also connected to benefiting local communities, whether the workers, host communities, and really see that connection of public investments and private investments advancing and securing industrial decarbonization in a way that also benefits people. So those are the ways that we need to begin to think about industrial decarbonization as first and foremost an economic strategy, and more importantly, an economic strategy that links from the beginning benefits to workers and local communities as the way of channeling that path forward. So I wanna make sure that we can all of us look at the Appalachian manufacturing plan and begin to look at those examples like RICE-PA as ways of learning from them and looking to further advance this mission forward.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Very, I think, effective contribution here around industrial decarbonization as economic opportunity, economic strategy. Some serious barriers nationally, subnationally. Renewable Thermal Collaborative is a very important research. Maybe drop the link in the chat if you haven't already. And speaking of the chat, I'll just highlight Ben Cross' comment that USA is the Saudi Arabia of waste heat. I thought that was ringing true to me. And sorry to rush through here, but appreciate that we are now turning it over to Debbie Stein. Take it away, Debbie. Debbie, you're currently muted.
Yep. There we go. So hi, everybody. So nice to be here and be part of this ReImagine Appalachia effort. I'm a consultant. I work for lots of different organizations, and I've been working in the Appalachian area for about a decade now. And so I wanted to kind of bring together projects that I've been doing for a number of different organizations, including ReImagine Appalachia, because I think a lot of it is really, relevant to today's discussion. So the first one I'll mention is one that we have coming out in about a month from now, which is about waste heat. And what it is about capturing the waste heat that right now is just from AI data centers that right now just kind of goes into the atmosphere, and trying to make something useful out of it. So you'll see in this figure on the left, it can be used for things that are community uses, think police stations, fire stations, libraries, things like pools, things like maybe greenhouses that can help some of our population who is food insecure, but also has an industrial base. And industry might be one of the best places to use it. And that relates also to what Amanda was saying earlier about sustainable manufacturing, eco-industrial parks, and having these data centers next to manufacturers and being able so they can make use of the heat. And that reduces, energy consumption for everybody, and also overall environmental impacts. So the other project that I've been working on for about the past 6 months, it just, for my part of it, at least finished up in December, but it's for everybody else, it's still kind of going on. This is from Catalyst Connection, which is a manufacturing extension partnership based here in Pittsburgh, but that does a lot in Southwest PA as a region, but also interfaces with Ohio and West Virginia. So what I've been doing for them is a whole series on supply chain and basically thinking locally for manufacturing. That for AI data centers themselves are not big employers, but if we think like about buying locally, using local things, and making that something we really advocate that the AI data centers do, then we can create more job creation. This is an excerpt from Petra Mitchell from something that she has in the Pittsburgh Business Times about the importance of focusing on things like workforce and supplier integration, regional manufacturing tech days, supplier outreach events. Right now, the AI data center management is really quite distant from the communities and from the manufacturing that is in the region. But if you look at this value chain document that I have here, you'll see there's all sorts of different things that we do make here in Appalachia, and there's no reason that these data centers can't help us with job creation and provide some community benefit by also buying locally. The last one is a part of the Act Now Coalition, which was mentioned yesterday. So this is a long-term project, but we're in the final year of that. So this has been going on for several years, and we're in year 4. The portion that I have been working on is under West Virginia University, and the project is called Reclaiming Minelands. And so what we've been doing for that is developing recommendations on policy shifts to create a more favorable regulatory environment. There's something called non-market factors, which are often unintentional barriers to advancement of products and companies. And so we've produced a whole bunch of these notes, like these legislative science technology notes were for the West Virginia legislature. And then we have other science technology notes. And you'll see, for example, the first one in advanced manufacturing, West Virginia. I found this particularly interesting. So we did an analysis looking at like what were shovel-ready sites of these former mine lands. And you can see West Virginia is quite low on the list compared to some of the other Appalachian states. And in order for manufacturers to be willing to consider coming to West Virginia, we really need to make sure that they are shovel-ready and that it's something where this could happen. Another part of this project is something like we call it a Zillow, and it's a way that people who are interested in relocating to West Virginia can get all the information and data they need to consider a site. So the next step for this project, which I'll be doing throughout 2026, is to gather perspectives. Like, for example, here we gathered perspectives of former coal mine landowners on development opportunities in West Virginia. All these draft ideas, policies, the Zillow, everything. I'll be doing meetings throughout West Virginia to gather input on it. So if you are a community group that's focused in West Virginia, and you'd like to kind of hear like some of the ideas that we have, and they're really ideas at this point, we really would like to get your input. And this is like my 4th project in West Virginia. And what we do is we have policy options that sort of come from the experts, but then they're prioritized by the West Virginians themselves to figure out what are the best actions to recommend to West Virginia policymakers. And with that, I'll close it. And if I have, by the way, there's a lot in here, I know, but there's links and everything in here, and the slides will be available for you if you want more information.
Thank you so much, Debbie. So, making something useful out of waste heat from AI data centers, real applications there. So going beyond theory, but to concrete ideas in communities. The importance of focusing on local suppliers, workers, looking at locally beneficial policies and actions, I think really hit home for me. That there can be community benefits from buying locally, and that these policy options need to be prioritized by those in the region themselves, I think was a powerful statement there. So we took it from the plan with Amanda to sort of macro framing with Nikhil, and then with Carlos and Debbie, really sort of practical, micro, narrowing in on the ground. While I'm about to ask a question. I think there's a Mentimeter for you, though, all 146 of you. So it's not just about listening to people. We want to ensure that your voices are part of this process. What should we focus on in 2026 for the Manufacturing Action Plan should be up on your screen. So please take a look and engage with that Mentimeter. But for our panelists, there are a few comments in the chat about and a very, very active chat, by the way. And I know it's sort of hard to go back and look at it all for all of the attendees, but I'll just say there are a few comments in the chat about the importance of connections between university resources and community needs. Do you have thoughts on how universities and community colleges can help grow workforce development, the industrial decarbonization actions, or other threads mentioned during our panel? Maybe to keep it simple, I'll start with Nikhil, given where you're sitting.
Yeah, I think that one of the real exciting opportunities at the moment is to start looking across individual university efforts into, again, how specific research for workforce can be coupled with specific research on supply chains. And so here, I think that there's a pattern historically of working with individual researchers and individual research teams at universities. And I think where we're headed to, and especially at CMU, one of the priorities that we really have is starting to build out more of these comprehensive efforts that really look across multiple individual research projects to address community needs more holistically. I think then there are real opportunities to kind of create intermediary organizations that live in between the universities and the specific companies or organizations that operate in a region, where these individual institutions, like the Keystone Research Center, for example, can help operationalize and actually execute on some of the research coming out of the universities and make sure that it's actually usable.
Carlos or Debbie, would you like to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I want to briefly mention, coming from the RTC, the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, one of the barriers that this cohort of over 130 organizations that operate globally but have a really, really very strong presence and footprint in the U.S., they have identified that one of the main barriers is workforce. Not only about the actual workforce that are needed in order to advance this transition, but also needed at the plant level, the factory level, but also the designers, the installers, the engineers. There's a really, really big need of bringing that workforce that is ready to really leverage the deployment of renewables, leveraging renewable technologies to really advance industrial decarbonization as a mean of moving a strong economic path, developing a strong economic path forward. So we really, really need to work with universities and not only universities, all the educational system in order to really educate and train and develop the workforce we need.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that Catalyst Connection, which is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership in Southwest PA, and I'm sure manufacturing extension partnerships throughout Appalachia, really have great education and workforce development programs. A lot of them, start at the high school level as well as go into community colleges. And some of them, I've done a lot of work for them in the past. Like I did focus groups with people who are unemployed in some of the areas of Pittsburgh that have the highest unemployment rates. And a lot of them face barriers it's not that they're unwilling to work in manufacturing. It's just, it can be a challenging place just for fundamentals like transportation. Or like one guy said, look, I'd like to be a welder, but I can't pay the union fee. So there's a lot of policy things we could do to help not just the young people, but also the people who've gotten laid off from some of these other industries that have undergone change.
So take a look, all participants here on screen. Really valuable to see what your peers and colleagues are sharing. So for Debbie, then Carlos, and then Nikhil, last lightning round, just a sentence or two in response. One of the notes in the chat was about whether we could use this work in manufacturing as a model for other sectors such as food and ag. Do you have thoughts, or can you share a thought on where to start to guide folks who want to dig into this multi-level thinking to make other areas of Appalachia's economy more sustainable and equitable? Let's start with Debbie, then Carlos, then Nikhil to wrap up, and then back to you, Dana.
Yeah, to me, it's sort of a combination of factors. It's not just education and workforce development, which is certainly a key part, but sort of as I mentioned earlier, it's a whole big picture. Things like housing and where people live and having childcare, which I saw flash by the screen, and transportation. I did a study in West Virginia looking at trying to get people with chronic health conditions to medical care. Well, it turns out half of West Virginia does not have any public transportation. So you can imagine trying to get to a job on a daily basis. So I think it's really important to take that systems approach and look at everything, not just like one little element.
Call that as of the systems approach. One quick example of one of our RTC members within the food and beverage sector. Not only they're looking to invest and decarbonize their actual facilities, in this case in Pennsylvania, but the raw products, the raw products they use to create their actual products comes from they engage in business with local agricultural co-ops, small scale farmers, therefore investing in those farmers while being investing in sustainable and conservation efforts and making sure that those farmers have the ability to really produce the key products that they use in order to create their processed foods, etc. It's also really important. So looking at protecting your local communities because you also engage in business with them and your business depends on them, while also investing in decarbonization and in renewables. It helps creates has a cascading effect of really potentially developing strong economic path forward for communities. So yeah.
Love that. Over to you, Nikhil, last word.
And I definitely think that these learnings can be applied to a bunch of other sectors. Food is a very similar sector to manufacturing, and I think requires similarly coordination up and down a complex value chain. And so it's really about how do you get people to be aware of the full value chain and understand that my investment here in this specific tiny component might not look that big of a deal, but taken in light of the big picture and the full suite of investments going on across the system, it is starting to get more exciting and more powerful. And then I'll just close that hopefully we're going to be launching some tools soon from CMU that will help individuals and regions do some of this system science approach and start to see how these individual industries are connected to one another. And always feel free to reach out to me personally.
Well, thank you for just an excellent conversation and session. Really appreciate it. Drop your contact details in the chat for anybody who wants to get in touch with you. And with that, over to you, Dana.